Hey guys, Corey Allen here. I'm joined by Chris Poyatt. Now, she is the regional captain of, she's from Horry County, the regional captain of the Convention of States. And tell us what exactly your area is that you're the captain of.
Well, this is South Carolina Convention of States. I am responsible for all the legislative districts between the North Carolina border and the Georgia border, and along the coastal region, pretty much east of Route 95.
Okay, and thank you so much for joining us. It's been a hectic week, and people are really looking for answers or a direction to go. And the Convention of States, you and I have talked about it a few times, but this might be a viable direction for people that are very upset with the government. Is that how you feel?
Well, I think that Convention of States is a legal process that was in part of the United States Constitution. When the Constitution was written, they recognized the fact that there might be a time when the federal government needed to change the Constitution, and they put in an Article 5, which provided the opportunity for amendments to be written. Surprisingly enough, before it was completely ratified by the founders themselves, after they wrote all 5 articles, they realized that they needed amendments, and they wrote the Bill of Rights, and we have the first 10 amendments. Subsequently, just before it was finally sent off for ratification, George Mason realized that the Article 5 provided the Constitution the opportunity for amendments by Congress only. And he felt that if there was a point in time when the government was out of reach or too large, or people were taking advantage, that the states themselves needed an opportunity to provide amendments, because the states initially wrote the Constitution. They were the ones that set it up in the first place. So they needed the opportunity themselves, besides Congress,
to change it,
to provide amendments.
Okay.
Right? And the Constitution belongs to the states, basically.
Right. It's an agreement, kind of a treaty between the states. That's how it was correct. Supposed to be. Now, have we ever had a successful Convention of States in the history of the United States?
No, there has never been a Convention of States called. There are hundreds of applications for conventions of states, none of which have actually been able to provide that opportunity, because every time a state provides a request for a Convention of States, that request is filed with the Supreme Court and the Congress. So there are hundreds of them that have been filed over the years, going back 100 years or more. In order for any of those requests for a convention to be held, it has to have 30, in our lifetime right now, it has to have 34 states approve the same convention. Back in the 50s, there was a large push for a balanced budget amendment. And that request for that Article 5 filed in 56 or whatever it was, is still floating around. And balanced budget people are very active in states today. They insist that they have 28 of the 34 required states. And they do have 28 states who have filed for a Convention of States for balanced budget. However, each of those states has a different request for why it should be filed, or what the circumstances around the convention would be. And when they are compared in the Supreme Court, many of those will not be allowed. They'll be discounted because they don't amalgamate. The rules for having a Convention of States is that if there are 34 states that want it, the language in the request has to be exactly the same.
Okay. So
it's called amalgamate.
Right. So what you're saying basically is that these 28 states out of the 34, they've each kind of made their own language up and made separate requests. And so that's an excuse for the government to not allow them to be counted as such. So is the language different in all of these because because states aren't actually agreeing on the language, so they're making their own, or is it just kind of a filing error or issue? Do they have a lot of differences? Is the language really different, all that different? And this is, of course, in regards specifically to a convention of states for a balanced budget amendment, right?
Yes, what we're talking about now is balanced budget. And
Okay.
yes, those are available. You can read them. You can go in and find out what they are. Some of them are exceedingly different. Some of them, some of those requests for this Article 5 go back 60 or 70 years. So they're exceedingly different with entirely different justifications, ramifications, and restrictions placed on the purpose. That's where this current Convention of States project is entirely different. We have requests filed. The national organization has requests filed in 50 states. They are working now. But the justification and the terminology and the purpose of the Convention of States listed in the resolution at the beginning is exactly the same in every one of the states as it's been presented. What differs in the requests is a result of the legislative language that is required by the individual constitution of each state. So if you look at the South Carolina resolution and you compare it with the Georgia resolution, the purpose, the statement, and the intent of the resolution is exactly the same. What will change will be the terms that are required or what the state requires for this convention to take place as far as that particular state is concerned.
So that's a difference in state constitutions is the issue there.
That's correct.
Okay. So a lot of people first don't even understand the Convention of States, which kind of is understandable because there's not any precedents that people can look to. Like you said, has never actually successfully taken place. But now there is definitely, it seems, a renewed interest in the concept of a Convention of States because so many people have tried doing these things. Now we have issues the issues that I've heard in regards to calling a Convention of States are the balanced budget amendment, which we were just speaking about, and also term limits for Congress people. So one of the questions that people have asked me is if we call a Convention of States and we all agree, let's say it's going to be a balanced budget, then we get to the convention, everything's done and they're at the convention. Is there anything stopping them from doing other things while they're there? And in theory, it's from what I gather, and I'm sure that you're going to be able to enlighten us all much more on this than I can. But it seems that in theory, no, they couldn't because it's supposed to be, this is what we're discussing and, that's it. However, since there's no precedent, people do fear that they could just say, well, while we're here, we're also going to change this. We're going to make a change to the Second Amendment. We're going to be doing this and that. That has stopped a lot of people from agreeing to go down this road because of those fears. What can you tell us about that?
And I've heard that discussion so many times.
I'm sure.
It's commonly called a runaway convention. That, there are people that fear that there's a whole new constitution, and once they get into office and they start debating, they're just going to throw out the U.S. Constitution and start over. That's absolutely absurd and legally impossible. The U.S. Constitution that exists is the one that allows this. Each state that approves the convention of states is approving a convention to discuss, merely discuss, ideas for amendments to the Constitution. And that will always be the case. It doesn't matter whether it's Convention of States or balanced budget or there's a term limits group out there. A convention of states can merely discuss. They can come up with a number of suggestions at the end of it, and then those go back to the states. Now, why I personally believe Convention of States is impossible for it to run away is because we were talking a few minutes about the resolution that's been presented in every different state. And that part of the resolution is exactly the same language from state to state. So every state that has approved or requested this convention has by law agreed to the language in the resolution. Convention of States resolution allows the discussion of 3 issues, which we can get into a little more in a few minutes, but term limits, bureaucracy, and budget. We'll call it budget. It's not balanced budget, but it's taxation and spending. Okay, as those 3 arms. Now, also in each resolution for each state, when we talk about the terms that are required by each state's constitution, is information about the penalty of someone as a commissioner from that state extending their reach beyond the initial resolution for those 3 issues. And every state has a penalty for any commissioner who violates the resolution by suggesting perhaps that we change the Second Amendment or dissolve the Second Amendment. And those resolutions by state are punishable. Some states, they're punishable by law. Well, they're in all states, they're punishable by law, but some states it's imprisonment, some states it's fines. And the other issue at that point in time is also let's if you're worried about a state perhaps canceling the Second Amendment, we can't have guns anymore.
Right.
If a liberal commissioner from any state were to suggest that, you can be fairly certain that every other commissioner from every other state is going to be up in arms and will notify the individual states. They're all bound by the same law. They're all bound by the same commitment from their own capital to follow the direction of the resolution. So, you know, if a commissioner from South Carolina said, okay, now we're going to allow all residents of the state to vote, which according to the United States Constitution, you have to be a citizen. Every other state is gonna complain to South Carolina that John Smith has just requested that open a conversation about something that's not part of it. And then the state would recall that particular commissioner and deal with him as they see fit.
I see. That's great to know, because these are the things, you know, when people are not informed, people can come up with these objections and you have no idea what to say to those. And then you have to just stop the discussion. But that's a perfect point. I mean, it can't become a runaway convention because everyone has already agreed on why they're there, and there are penalties for trying to guide it in a different direction. That is pretty cut and dry, it seems to me. So as far as the process, so you have a group like the Convention of States that writes this language and is taking it to legislative bodies throughout the country. Is that kind of what's going on?
Yes, actually, as a grassroots organization, we have taken this to state representatives in state houses and assemblies and senates, and presented the idea saying that as citizens, we feel that the United States government has come out of its constitutional box, so to say.
Right.
When the Constitution was written, we need to remember a few things going back a little bit in history. the states, the 13 original colonies, did not agree about many things when they were 13 colonies. And it took them a long time to get to agree to the Declaration of Independence. So 12 years after the Declaration of Independence, when the founding fathers are writing the Constitution, they recognize that one state is not happy with another. Massachusetts doesn't like Virginia. New York isn't crazy about South Carolina. They have all these differences. They can never totally, completely unify them or expect that each of the states is going to accept the other. So they realized that in writing the Constitution, these states needed to maintain their autonomy. And in that process, the articles that they established maintained independence and sovereignty for each individual state, but provided the the unity with certain unifying protections that would give each state protection internally within the federal union and also from foreign enemies. So the purpose was for states to remain autonomous. Well, we've gotten way past that at this point in time.
That's true. That's absolutely.
And as a result, the Convention of States has put together this concept where we're trying to look at the federal government as the Leviathan that it is and say to state representatives, it's time for you to take your power back, to regain your autonomy, and to put the federal government back in its constitutional box, so to speak, and provide the states with the independence to establish their own control over their own citizens.
And, so we've seen a lot of, just recently, the state legislatures in a number of states, just in the past few months, many questions have arisen about basically them being cut off from all of their power, losing a lot of their power. And so this is one way, probably the best way, that they could begin, that these state legislatures could begin getting their power back, their constitutionally provided and protected power. The state legislatures are the ones who will be signing off on this. So tell us about how these people will be chosen to go to this convention. How many does each state send to this convention? What does it take for an article to actually pass the convention? And how are these people chosen?
Okay, well, that's one of the points that is determined by each individual state.
Okay.
States are entitled to determine how their commissioners are sent by themselves. And so we don't make recommendations about how the state determines. But I know that there are restrictions that commissioners cannot be members of the legislature. Commissioners cannot be, and this, when it's approved, is not, they will be approved as commissioners by the legislature and the governor, but they cannot be members of the legislature. So we're in a position where we don't control who picks them. The state picks them. In South Carolina, if I remember correctly, having gone through this, it says something about the majority of the House in Columbia would pick X number of commissioners. The majority would pick a few more. And then there are some that are appointed at large. I think that in my mind, as you get to the point where a state legislature, both the House and the Senate, agrees that this is a necessary component to maintaining its autonomy nationally and controlling the federal government, that they're going to end up picking commissioners agreeably that are non-political, but exceedingly informed in the issues of budget or bureaucracy, so that the discussion that occurs at the convention can have input from real people and not politicians.
Yeah, and that's extremely important. So let's say we're at the convention. Let's just say it is that there are two issues on it: balanced budget, or the tax and spend issue, and the term limit issue. Does each state commission get one vote, or is that how that works?
Yes.
Okay.
Each, as the commissioners from every state debate, you can be fairly certain that the people that are interested in budget and taxation are going to be somewhat different than the people that might be interested in term limits.
Right.
And discussions will go on in different places at different times based on whatever arm of this of the amendment process they're supposedly looking at or debating.
Of course.
At the end of the debate, they can come up with whatever suggestions they want in the form of amendments. There could be maybe 3 amendments that come out based on term limits, or just one, or none. We don't know. They're going to come to whatever agreement they want. When they decide that they're finished with each individual amendment and they've come to a conclusion, each state gets one vote. It's one vote per state on each individual recommendation that results from the debate of this convention.
Okay, so let's say they go ahead and they come out with 2 recommendations. You're saying that they will send those to their state legislatures to vote on. Now, you said that before that we have to have 34 states agree on the language and everything before it gets sent to a convention. If you get 34 on the dot and you hold a convention, are you saying that convention would be held without the other 16 states?
It certainly could be held without the other 16 states, but why would the other 16 states not at least send commissioners?
Right, that's right.
I mean, they might not want to do it, but if they don't do it, it's at their peril.
Is it simple majority, 60%?
No. This is the highest legislative, the highest legislative bar we have in the country. This is 38 states have to pass.
Okay. 38 states. That's big.
Corey, let me just, in order for us to get a convention approved by, let's say, the South Carolina state legislature, we're in the process of doing that now. The process itself is daunting. So we present this resolution to the House of Representatives in Columbia and to the Senate in Columbia. Each of those houses then takes that resolution as it's worded and sends it to the Judiciary Subcommittee. And it goes through hearings in the Judiciary Subcommittee. If it passes those hearings, it then goes to the Judiciary Committee. If it passes those hearings, it goes to a full House floor vote or a full Senate floor vote. That's 6 hearings. Now, it could go all the way through in the Senate and die in the House, or it could go all the way through in the House and die in the Senate. Just one committee can kill it. That same process happens in every state. Right. For every amendment. They are not treated as a bulk unit. They are voted on independently.
See.
And anyone who believes that a bad amendment is going to get that far needs to remember that if you're talking about it passing in 37 or 38 states, it just takes 12 to say no.
Right.
We understand what the government is. We know how it works. Our eyes have been opened in the last few years, and we've seen the path that it's taken in many directions, in a term limits direction, in a budget direction, in a bureaucracy direction.
Yes.
We may not be able to stop it all, We may not be able to stop any, but if we don't try, then we get what we deserve. Freedom is not free. And as a society, I'm 70 years old. As a society, I have to admit that I had become exceedingly complacent with the freedom and the liberties that I've enjoyed all my life. I remember my dad talking stories about World War II. He was in the first wave of D-Day. He was a medic in the first wave of D-Day.
Oh, wow.
And that's horrifying. But they did that because they needed to protect liberty from a world tyrant and a horrifying situation.
Yes.
And as a result, the only other time other than listening to that are the few times that in my life I saw this country come together and find our liberty shaken, with 9/11 or with, we identified our lives, our adult lives, by historical occurrences.
That's true. Yeah.
But in the process, we kind of take the everyday life, which seems so normal and seems so typical, for granted, without actually thinking that this is a freedom that most people don't have. It doesn't come free. But if we have a legitimately legal challenge and a way to accomplish that legally according to the Constitution, why wouldn't we?
Yeah, we must exhaust all of these legal paths. We have to. And it's really, it's time to look at these things. We are in unprecedented times. We see some unprecedented things happening in the nation and in the world, really, if we're honest. But times like those call for something that is unprecedented. And I would say that the time to really study, for those out there who have heard about this but haven't really looked into it, this Convention of States idea, it is time to really take an honest and true look at this idea of a Convention of States, because I'll tell you, I really think that it might be the only way for us to get this, what we've seen as an oligarchy, really, under control, and give the states back some of the power that they are supposed to have according to the Constitution. So tell me, where can people go online, or what can they do to learn more about this, to kind of sign up, or all of that? Tell us where people can go to get a deeper look into this.
The Convention of States has a website.
Okay.
With lots and lots of information about the reasons, the justifications, the process. It has all of that information, the progress that Convention of States has made. It also has on that page a way for you to take action.
What is that website?
It's conventionofstates.com.
Oh, well, that's easy.
That's all it is.
That's easy.
Yep.
And we'll link that.
For those people who think that, I've heard all kinds of things, and we talked earlier about the people who expected to run away and are complaining about that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they're complaining about the lack of freedom, about the freedoms that are being removed. Mm-hmm. If you're not going to do something, then you don't have much room to complain. But if we don't do something, doing nothing does not seem to be an option. So true. You're only facilitating by complaining. You're facilitating Marxists and socialists who do want to take away the rest of liberties as we see them and value them.
That's true. That's true. Well, Chris, thank you so much for this interview. It has been truly enlightening for me. And I think that this is going to be a great jumping off point for the movement. And I think that a lot of people who see this, who might have had questions or concerns, I think a lot of those have been answered. And at the very least, this has given them a direction to go. I think this is a very viable option personally. I truly do think that this is a very a very good thing that could happen, and the precedent that it sets for the future of reining in federal government could be the savior that our nation might need. I truly do believe that. So hopefully we can get one convention of states under our belt so we can see how it really works in practice. And we look forward to following this journey along and seeing where it leads. Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate it. I'd just like to add that we are not affiliated with any political party.
Mhm.
And everyone's welcome. The train is in the station. Please hop on board
Yeah.
and travel through this journey for continued freedom and blessings for my children and my grandchildren, which is why I'm doing it, because my life is not quite over, but I'm at the end, but theirs is just beginning. And I want them to be able to have the freedom and blessings that I had to make choices for myself and my future.
It's for the future. It's for the future. Well, thank you again so much for sharing all of this with us. And we look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thanks for the opportunity. Education is our greatest weapon.
Absolutely.